Welcome to Seductive Chronicles. In today's video, we unravel the story of a woman rediscovering herself through a quiet, unexpected connection. It was one of those muted Thursday afternoons when the world felt far away. The sky was that washed-out early spring gray, and rain tapped steadily against the windows, making the house feel more still than usual. My husband Mark had been in Seattle on business for 2 days. Even after all these years, the silence took some adjusting. I'd made chamomile tea and was curled on the couch under a heavy knit throw, the kind that felt like it remembered you. A half-read book rested in my lap, something I'd picked up 3 times and never finished. I was drifting somewhere between the pages and the hush of the rain when the doorbell rang. It startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. I set the cup down and patted across the floor in my slippers. When I peeked out, I was surprised to see Paul, Mark's oldest friend from college. I hadn't seen Paul in months. He usually only came by when Mark was home. He'd always been warm, thoughtful in that quiet, unassuming way. We'd never spent time alone. I opened the door, brushing my hair back, aware of how unpolished I must have looked. No makeup, hair in a loose bun, wearing my oldest cardigan. "Paul?" I said, confused but not unwelcoming. He smiled that familiar, understated smile and held up a brown paper bag. "Hey, Helen. I was nearby picking something up and remembered you liked the almond scones from that bakery on 5th. Thought I'd drop some off." I blinked, caught off guard by the thoughtfulness. "That's really kind." He handed me the bag. I stepped aside instinctively. "Come in, you'll catch a cold." He hesitated, then nodded, slipping off his coat. We moved to the kitchen, where the scent of warm pastry mingled with the rain. He took a seat at the breakfast table while I poured fresh tea. It all felt so natural, so ordinary, but beneath it was something I couldn't name, an energy, slow and quiet. "You look well," he said as I handed him a cup. I laughed, brushing a non-existent crumb off my sleeve. "I look like I've been fighting the thermostat all morning, but thank you," he smiled, still more composed than most people I know. We talked, really talked, for the first time in years, about work, aging parents, memories of trips he and Mark had taken. He told a story about their Grand Canyon road trip that I'd heard Mark recount a dozen times, but somehow Paul's version made me laugh as if it were new. Maybe it was the way he told it, thoughtful, vivid. Somewhere in the conversation, the tone shifted. He asked gently, "How have you really been?" I didn't expect the question to land so deeply. My hands wrapped around the warm mug. "Some days, I feel exactly where I'm supposed to be. Other days, I feel like I'm just going through the motions." He nodded, his gaze steady. "I get that more than I'd like to admit." A long pause settled between us. Not awkward, just full of something unspoken. His eyes met mine a little longer than they should have. "You ever wonder," he began carefully, "if we settle too easily, out of habit?" I swallowed, my throat tight. "Sometimes, but I also think some choices aren't settling. They're surviving." He didn't answer. Instead, he reached across the table and rested his hand lightly on mine. His skin was warm, tentative. I didn't pull away. It wasn't romantic, not exactly. It was just human. Two people alone, feeling something stir that had been dormant for too long. He withdrew his hand slowly. "Sorry," he murmured. "I didn't mean to cross a line." "You didn't," I said. My voice felt too small. "I just wasn't expecting it." He nodded. We finished our tea in silence, a gentler quiet now, like something had been acknowledged and set free. When he stood to leave, he looked at me with a softness I hadn't seen in years. "Thanks for the company. Thanks for the scones." And then he was gone. The door clicked softly behind him, leaving me standing in the hush with the faint smell of almond and rain. The next morning I woke earlier than usual. The bed felt too wide. I sat by the window with my coffee, watching the sunrise. The light cast a muted glow over the backyard. I should have felt peaceful, but my thoughts kept circling back to that moment in the kitchen, the warmth of his hand, the look in his eyes. Why did it stay with me? I told myself it was just because I missed being seen. Mark and I loved each other, but our marriage had settled into quiet rhythms, comfortable, predictable. We hadn't been tender in a long time. Later that afternoon, I was in the garage, searching for old garden tools, when my phone buzzed. Is Paul. Hey Helen, just wanted to say I enjoyed yesterday. You've always made people feel at ease. Hope you're having a good day. I read the message over and over before replying. It was nice. Thank you for stopping by. When I hit send, my heart thudded harder than it should have. That night, I lay awake. I kept thinking about how he'd looked at me, like I wasn't just someone's wife, but a whole person. Saturday morning was cold and grey. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, anything to keep my thoughts busy. Around noon, my phone rang again. Paul. I answered, trying to sound casual. Hi, he said. I know it's last minute, but there's a photography exhibit at the museum. 60s protest photos. You always liked that era, right? I did. Mark hated museums. I hadn't been in years. I was thinking, he continued, since Mark's still out of town, maybe you'd like to go. Just friends, catching up. I could have said no. I could have stayed safe. Sure, I heard myself say. That sounds nice. We met in the museum parking lot. He was leaning against his car, hands in his pockets. When he smiled, something in my chest folded open. Inside, the museum was hushed and warm. We moved slowly through the exhibit, pausing at images of marchers and young lovers on park benches. Unlike previous marches, the park benches were sold, strapped in, and packed. I felt like I'd stepped out of my life and into a memory of who I'd once been. Curious, awake. After, we walked to a cafe nearby, tucked into a corner booth with chipped wood tables. He asked about my old journals, about the stories I'd written when I was younger. No one ever asked me about that anymore. You should start again, he said softly. I think you still have something to say. I looked at him, feeling something fragile and undeniable. Then he said, I used to think I'd end up with someone like you. The air shifted. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to run. Another part wanted to reach for his hand. Instead, I whispered, it's getting late. He walked me to my car. Under the budding cherry trees, he paused. Thank you, he said. For today. For not making me feel foolish. You're not a fool, I whispered. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against mine. A touch that felt like every word we hadn't said. Then he stepped back, smiled, and turned away. I sat in my car for a long time before I drove home. Mark came back late Sunday carrying the usual airport gifts. We fell back into our routines, dinner at 7, TV until we both drifted off. But inside, something was different. Tuesday morning, I stood in front of the closet, staring at my old journals. I pulled one down, wiped the dust away, and started reading. My younger handwriting was bright and certain, pages full of dreams, unfinished stories. That afternoon, Paul texted again. Are you free for coffee? No pressure. Just could use some good company. I didn't answer immediately. I made tea, sat by the window, and let myself feel everything. Hope, fear, curiosity. Then I replied, yes. Same cafe? When I arrived, he was already there, reading. He looked up and smiled. You came, he said simply. We talked about little things, work, books, but beneath it something steady pulsed, like a quiet understanding neither of us needed to name. He handed me a small envelope. What's this? Something I wrote, he said, his voice soft. You don't have to read it. Or if you do, you don't have to tell me. I took it without opening it. When I got home, I tucked it into my journal. That night, when the house was still, I opened it under the kitchen light. It wasn't long, a single page about the first day we met, how I'd made everyone laugh, how I always made people feel safe. He ended with, I just wanted you to know you were never invisible, not to me. I folded the letter and pressed it to my heart. The days afterward were ordinary. Mark didn't ask questions, but he watched me with a tenderness I hadn't seen in years. You seem different, he said one evening. I think I am. He reached for my hand, and though it wasn't fireworks, it was comfort. The next weekend, I drove past the old softball field. Paul was there, reading on a bench. He didn't see me. I didn't get out. I just watched him for a while, feeling something warm and sad and grateful. He hadn't come to break my life apart. He'd come to remind me I still had one. When I got home, Mark looked up and smiled. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, meaning it. I went upstairs, opened a fresh notebook, and began to write. Sometimes life doesn't give you answers, only moments that wake you up. And I was awake again.